Hi, Slater here with Salami, and we want to share with you some of the elements that we use in our layouts that you may want to consider when designing your next slot car track.
If you're using shoulders on your turns, depending on the cars you're driving and how you drive, keep in mind that if you terminate your shoulder, this is the terminator here, if you terminate it here, you might end up sliding off the end of that terminator if your car slides out a lot, it drifts a lot. That's why on our track, this is a pretty high speed turn here, we use a straight shoulder here to extend it, because sometimes our cars will actually drift well beyond within the straightaway here. As a matter of fact, we got some cars we've drifted past this terminator too, and we've actually had to add a second straight shoulder out here because we had so much drift, especially if you're running no mag. Absolutely, and even with mag sometimes. Talking about cars that drift, this is a good time to bring up placement of tracks that have sensors, which is your lane changers, your entrance to pit lane, and your start-finish line. And the lane changer, for example here, this sensor that detects when you want to change lanes is here. Okay. So under here on the car, this is your infrared emitter, and that's what puts out the signal that's picked up by the sensor when you want to change lanes. And if you come around this turn and you're sideways enough, this is no longer aligned with the sensor and it's not going to know to change lanes. So something to keep in mind, you may want to have a straight piece of track before your lane changers so that your car has time to square up. Likewise with the start-finish line, there are sensors in the track that pick up your infrared signal. So when you cross, it counts your lap. Now, if your car is slightly sideways, or sideways enough coming over to start-finish line, hear that? There's no beep. That sensor's not aligned. So this is why we don't have this track here right after a turn, because you could very well be a little sideways coming out of this turn. So we always put two straight tracks, at least two, between any turn and the start-finish line. That way the car has time to square up, and then it'll definitely hit that sensor and count your lap. We like to run a dual pit lane. Therefore, we've got two pit lane kits. And that way when, let's say somebody's in here and they're taking a full tank and somebody wants a partial pit, a splash and go, they can come in and then go straight through and they don't have to wait for somebody in front of them. Now, the entrance to pit road is here. And so this is actually technically the pit. You will fuel here, you'll fuel here, you'll fuel here. But the way that we run is, our rules are you pretty much have to pull all the way through, and then that way you don't clog up pit road. Now, if you don't have to do anything special. You just get two pit lane kits, and you can put them together like this, and it'll fuel you anywhere. Now, if you are using the advanced pit lane, you either need to use two advanced pit lane sections where it splits, or if you have it set up like this where you've got a straight section in the pit before it splits again, you can just use one advanced pit lane section and put it here. Of course, the advanced pit lane section is if you've got your start-finish line or your control track here. That way it still counts your lap when you actually go through the pit. But this works out really well. Keeps pit road a little from getting too hectic and people pushing other people out of the pits and that kind of thing, which is a penalty. Big penalty. It's a DQ, actually. I probably don't need to mention this, but be sure to put a lane changer just before your pit. You don't want to be coming around in this lane, realizing you need to pit, and then forgot that the last lane change to get into the correct lane was halfway around the track. We always run a single lane change in front of the pit, left to right, as opposed to a double lane change. And then that way, if you're coming up on the pit and you hit the button too soon, for example, you're not going to accidentally change away from the pit road. Or if you forget what lane you're in, for example, and you hit the button, you don't change away from pit lane. At the other end of the pit, we always have a lane change from right to left just before the exit of pit road. And then this way, we have a car that's coming down the front stretch by the pit, and then the driver, not paying attention, comes out of the pit, and we end up with a collision and bad language and arguing and so forth. So when we have this lane change, this allows the driver coming down the front stretch to change away from the pit exit, and then that way a moron blowing the yield sign doesn't cause a crash. One thing you may have noticed is this ugly green tape down here. That's just taping down the power taps. If your track is over 30 feet or 10 meters, you're going to need to add additional power taps. So what we're doing here is from the power track, we've got one that feeds this, which is about, what is that, 30, well, the track is about 30 meters, right?
Yeah, we're about 100 feet.
Yeah, so we're about, this is about 10 meters from the power track, and then this other one is about 10 meters. And you'll notice if you don't have a power tap on a large track, you're going to notice your cars are slowing down in some sections of track for no reason. And also, your lane changers might not even activate. They might not even have enough power to activate. So, yeah, once you get, again, basically over every 10 meters or every 30 feet of track, you're going to want to add another power tap that comes straight from your source, which is your control track here. Even though this is a digital track and you can switch lanes, we like to try to balance the lanes as much as possible, meaning that one lane doesn't have a very large advantage over the other lane. Otherwise, you end up with just everybody running in that faster lane. And we accomplish that in a couple different ways. Firstly, we pay attention to the ratio of left turns and right turns. It's easy to design a track on your track editor, for example, or just kind of throw it together on the floor or on a table, and it looks cool until you realize that it's mostly left turns or mostly right turns. And so we try to make sure that our ratio of lefts to rights is pretty close. In this example here, this track pretty much runs right turn, right turn, right turn, right turn with the occasional left chicane. And here's an option to kind of fix that.
some back.
No, they're definitely, that right there, you get it back.
Yeah, you do. That area you get back.
Oh, that's early.
Although this looks like it might be a 4-lane track, it's not. We just have a lot of these lanes nested inside of each other to save on space. So these lanes here are actually opposing traffic. That bank turn is opposing traffic. And this section in here is opposing traffic. And of course, turn around here, and then our loop turnaround loop is on the other side over here. Much of the design of this track is because we run club races, and therefore, for example, you might notice there's not a lot of turns or anything in the middle of the track. It's pretty much straight sections with turns at the very ends. And the reason that we do that is because we have turn marshals and put cars back on the track. And our drivers sit here, and if we end up with a section of track where people are most likely to wipe out on, a big technical section in the middle, you're going to need a marshal in the middle, and they're going to get in the way of the drivers. So we essentially set this up so that you pretty much only need marshals on this end and maybe one in the back corner. And another reason why we've got our bank turns back here, you're very less likely to crash on a bank turn, and so we put those where they're kind of inaccessible, and we don't need to have marshals back in that area.
Yes, sir, number 3.
Oh, it was you.
Oh, I don't see. Yeah, I was right behind it.
Oh, Phil.
I mean,
No, I didn't see that. I didn't know who did it.
Oh, that's got to go on the outside slot.
someone's gonna pay for it.
You know, another thing about these bank turns is they are very easy to hook your. If you're trying to step over, this is on the floor, obviously. If this is on a tabletop, not so much of a concern. But when it's on the floor, these bank turns, it's very easy to catch your toe on this when you're trying to step over the track, and therefore we put them where there's not a lot of traffic, foot traffic anyway.
We wrecked them.
Yeah. And also the same reason we don't have a lot of overpasses. We have one overpass in here, and that is essentially to keep the lanes very even so that we don't have one lane that's faster than the other. And for the same reason, we don't want a lot of raised track when we got people trying to marshal cars and trying to step over the track. It's just a real good way to damage your track. So we limit our overpasses as well for that reason. And again, this is club racing. If you're, if you just have a small setup on a tabletop and you're running with your kids or something like that, or a couple of friends or whatever, not something that you need to really consider too much, but for our purposes, definitely a consideration. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and also let us know what types of videos you'd like to see us do next.